All righty, my name is Ben Williams. I'm a Texas broker at El Paso, Texas. I run a team called the War Team, and we are going to do a class today on the contract or the amendment to contract, which is the TXR 1903. All right, got my teammates in here. We're going to break this thing down, and hopefully this helps somebody along the way, along this journey. Okay, that being said, I'm going to go back and forth a little bit because I want to show you some things that will support it inside of the contract, right? So we'll probably do the portion about changing paragraph 12. But I'm going to go back and show you paragraph 12 so you can see it, right? So that's the whole point of the right of everything. Then at the end of this, we're going to have you fill out an amendment jointly. The first hour is going to be the class. The second hour is going to be you actually applying it and doing it. All right. Is everybody with me on that one? Okay. That being said, let's hop in here. So the latest and greatest form is the effective date, November 4th, 2024. You know that you're required to use the most recent publication, most promulgated form there is, right? So that's what you have to do. This is the most recent one. When you get into this, if you want to see this, jointly is a little bit different because it asks you questions and you answer the questions, and then it populates it for you afterwards. So we're seeing the overarching whole form, and then we'll jump into jointly here in a second. First things first, at the very top, of course, you have to have the street address, right? And city, that's what's going to be at the very top. And then this portion is let's stop. What is an amendment for? Let's ask that question for. What is the amendment? What it is and what it's not. Change to the contract. And when we say contract, what are we really talking about? Change to any executed. We have an executed contract. We have all the addendums already with the executed contract. We've done all these things, right? Third-party finance addendum, non-realty items addendum, fixture lease addendum. All those things are already in place. Lead-based paint addendum, right? Because addendums are what? They're part of the process when you execute, right? Amendment's going to be you already have all these things in place, and now where the buyer and seller wants to modify or change something that's already been agreed upon. Please understand the difference, because you're going to get agents out there that will try and send you an amendment during the process of executing the contract. Different scenarios. We had so many crazy things going on during COVID, and it's just not the way it's supposed to be done. You shouldn't have an amendment at the same time you're executing the contract. Just shouldn't happen, right? When we get into it, the first portion, number one, all right, section number one, it's really just to change the cash payable at closing, right, which is section A, the financing piece of it, and so total sales price. Right. Usually what's happening in the contract, you've already said, okay, hey, look, we're going to put X down, 20% down. That's what the offer came in with, or it came at 3.5% down, or it came at 0% down, right? You already got something established for cash portion. You probably already got something established for financing portion, right? And you probably already got a total sales price. If any of those three things change, this is where you would go change it. Now, I always get the same question about the third-party finance addendum, right? Some people say, okay, look, we changed the down payment. Do I have to go and change the addendum? All right, because in the third-party finance addendum, it has a certain amount that you're financing, correct? And if we come in here, we change the financing amount, do I have to go change the third-party finance addendum? No, this is going to supersede it. All right, this is the change because the addendum was part of the contract. Now here we're changing that portion of it, so you don't need to go back and change the third-party finance addendum because this will change it. Everybody with me? Okay. Now I usually get the questions about, hey, what if we change the percentage of what's the amount that was allowable and stuff like that? All right. If you really wanted to get in the weeds of that, that would come down to other modifications on this amendment. Because you know how in the third-party finance addendum, you've got the allowable percent is 8% or 1%, whatever. You really want to get into that, you can put it in other modifications. But the addendum is the addendum. It stays the same, but this will supersede the addendum. Everybody with me on that? Okay, cool. right? So part one, pretty easy on that one, right? Any questions about part one? Let's get into probably the one that everybody wants to talk about, right? And there's several different ways that people do this. I'm going to show you the way I want you to do it as your broker. All right. When it comes down to repairs and treatments, right? And we're going to do a exercise in this. Typically what this looks like is it says, okay, seller agrees to complete repairs and treatments, right? You must be clear and very detailed about what those treatments will be. Give example, says licensed roofer replace damaged shingles, right? Do you really have to have that word license? Probably not, because the contract says the person has to be licensed for that trade. But if you just wanted to be sure and put that there, you can put it there. I tell people all the time with this one right here, you can do, and I'll give you some examples here in a second. You could say, okay, hey, look, see inspection dated 9/11/2025, section C1 A, B. You could do that, right? But if section C1 AB doesn't clearly specify exactly what the buyer is trying to get repaired, replaced, you're not doing the buyer no justice. So you're going to see the way I do it. I'll still put that C inspection dated such and such. And the reason I put the inspection date, we have the reference points. There could be multiple inspections on one property, right?
Yeah.
I've been in situations, there's been multiple inspections on one property. So I'll say inspection dated XYZ and section C12, whatever that is. But then you're going to find out what I end up doing. I will specify very clearly of replaced, repaired, and then the actual thing that I want fixed or repaired. If you have a lot of repairs that the buyer's requesting, luckily jointly, it'll have a automatic exhibit A or exhibit something come out on another page. So you can keep on writing on that as much as you want. It will automatically populate an exhibit for you, right? So you don't really have to worry about writing too much or not being able to fit everything in that section. All right, so if that's what you're doing, great. I like people to read this.
I got a quick question, Ben. Are you saying I can either reference the inspection report and then find an inspection report and reference that into this document, or do I need to itemize everything specifically?
I'm saying that you should be doing a combination of both. I'm going to show you guys some examples here. Let me pull up some stuff for you. All right, so you can see here, got the inspection date. I put the page number and just say, okay, replace weather stripping on garage door. Then the next page, fix leaky faucet. All right. Patch and paint stucco in exhibit A and B. If you look at exhibits, it's down here. Put the pictures of the exhibit, what we want patched, right? Make sure that was pretty clear. To just give example. So there's no questions about exactly what we want. We're clear on it, right? Does that make sense? Now, if you really wanted to detail it down, because I'm not a big fan of giving the listing agent the full inspection, right? You go other places in the other parts of Texas, they will get totally peed off if you send them the listing, the inspection, right? Because now they have it. And so if the contract doesn't close with your buyer, they no longer can say they don't have an inspection report. They have to go back and have the seller fill out something and say, okay, hey, we do have an inspection report on the seller's disclosure. They got to do an amendment to the seller's disclosure to sit there and say, hey, we have an inspection report. If you go to other parts of the country, it's accepted in El Paso. I don't know why. But if you do deals outside of El Paso and you send that inspection report over, some people are going to be like, why did you send that? They get pissed off, right? Because they don't want all that. They just want what's needed. And then let me make my decision. That's all that's needed. And I think I was trying to tell you the other day, yeah, don't, if I'm the listing agent, I'm telling you right now, don't send me the inspection report. I don't want to, just send me what you want repaired. And if you did receive an inspection report, now at that point in time, you ethically obligated to go tell that seller, if you're a listing agent, hey, we got to modify the seller's disclosure. And now we got to put in there, hey, we've received the inspection report. And now we got to disclose that to the buyers right? I'm not trying to do anything unethically. I just saying I don't need it. Just give me what I need and we can go from there.
You have to update that, like how much they give you in an amendment request, and they're giving you photos as well.
I don't have the full inspection report.
So you're not, yeah, that's not, I didn't see it.
No, I don't have to change
But we're
anything.
gonna negotiate on what I do know, or what we're talking about.
So right here, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. From what you receive here, you're the listing agent. Say this deal doesn't close. Are you required to update the sales disclosure?
Right, from what you were.
No, because you don't have the full report.
Right. And
You-
you scroll down, and you said it's just added on the bottom of this where you added your pictures?
Jointly would do this for you
Okay.
if need be. But if you put it in there, that's just the way I do.
Walk through that real quick?
Walk through what? I will. The second hour. Let me get through. That's what we're gonna all do this. Everybody's gonna do this. I'm gonna make everybody do exhibits and everything the second hour.
But just through the photos for
What-
exhibits, no verbiage, snapshots of the inspection report.
I'm not saying that you can't.
Okay.
All right, if that's what you wanna, if you wanna detail it down more, the picture, on this picture, I want this corner, whatever. If you wanna do, that's up to you. But I try and keep it just to what the buyer wants fixed. I don't see there's no need for anything extra than that. And as you see, I did describe it up here. You got the
Right.
verbiage up here. And I say, okay, see exhibit A and B attached. I've explained what I want. I'm pretty detailed on page 20, fix leaky faucet, cool. On page 9, replace the weather stripping on page 9, right? And I send that over page 9 as well, right? Page 20, I send over page 20, and I send over exhibit A and B. Okay, so they got page 9, they got page 20, and exhibit A and B. That's what they got from me. The listing agent doesn't have to say that they received the whole report. If my buyer don't close, that's all they got. Okay. Now, if I had sent the whole thing to him, technically that listing agent should have went back to their seller and said, hey, I need you to change this seller disclosure. They got another form for that and say, update that, hey, you received a inspection report.
If the listing agent requests it, any qualms on just send it?
Yeah, if the listing agent asks for it, you can send it. It's okay. Don't send it to me. If they ask for it, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that if they do send it.
The negotiation piece though, unless they know what's on there.
It just depends on the situation. Give me some more context. What do you mean?
You sell it to them?
It would be a positive to say, look, there's like all of this wrong, and I'm only asking for this.
You can't sell it to them. You didn't pay for it.
Make the buyers money
Give them their
back.
option money back.
You'd be in real estate jail. You can't do that. The buyer can do whatever they want, but you as an agent, you can't facilitate that. You would just be all types of wrong. What'd you say, Matt?
I was jumping on top of what he was saying.
Like them having everything that was wrong and then they could be like, I'm gonna fix this and that. They have a whole list of repairs, then they have the cost of repairs. And so they'll be like, you're asking for this, but I'll fix this and that instead of this.
It could add perspective for the sellers. Like,
If that's where y'all want a real estate, you can. But I would say if you go to fill it out and have it on this amendment, I would want it detailed down. For the facts of negotiation, if that's the way you want to negotiate, that's fine.
If they ask for it though, I'm trying to figure out a way to tell them.
To stick to the class, those are negotiation tactics. I want to stick to the class about what this looks like. To request properly what the repairs or treatment should be, I want it to look like this. Okay? You're going into negotiations, and that's a total different lane, right? Yeah, so let's stick to this because we would be here till midnight. Okay, everybody with me on that one? Questions about this one so far? All right. It also says, okay, look at this other thing. It says, notice paragraph 7 of the contract governs the completion. And what they mean by that, what do they mean by that? When does repairs have to be complete? No, not before it's executed. What does the contract say? It says before closing. Let's look at paragraph 7, just so y'all don't take my word for it. Let's put paragraph 7. I wish it said before walkthrough. I would love that one right there.
That makes more sense.
It makes sense, don't it? All right. So don't be that agent that calls and as soon as the amendment is executed and one day later, repairs done? That's just crazy. I've been in a situation like that. I'm like, come on, give me a break, man. The contract says before closing. I've had people think they had to be done before the option period. I'm like, come on, give me a break. 9 chances out of 10, depending on the scenario and how long the contract is, if there's financing involved, repairs ain't gonna be done until after the appraisal. Be honest with you. Most people are gonna probably sit there and say, okay, because they want to see if it's gonna appraise and all the stuff that comes with that before they have their seller dump money into something on a buyer that this probably go walk away if it didn't appraise. So most times it's going to be like that. I typically, depending on the situation, if it's a short contract, I say, let's get it done. But if it's a 30-day contract and we still got the appraisal, I'm going to probably say, hey, Mr. Seller, hold off until we get the appraisal. If the appraisal doesn't work, why spend money on this, have my seller spend some money on the buyer that's not even going to make it to the finish line. So that's just something personally for me that I look at. It just depends on the situation. If it's a lot of repairs and it's going to take a lot of time, then I'm going to be like, yeah, we need to get this done, right? But if it's something minor and it's going to take a 1 day of work, I'm probably going to tell the seller, say, hey, just hold off until we, where are we going? Like forms. Trying to go to the forms. Okay, we're going to, so in terms of repairs, Mike, you pretty close. Completion of repairs. Can you take that one for me? F.
Completion of repairs and treatments, unless otherwise agreed in writing, seller shall complete all agreed repairs and treatments prior to the closing date and obtain any required permits. Repairs and treatments must be performed by persons who are licensed to provide said repairs or treatments, or if no license is required by law, are commercially engaged in the trade of providing such repairs. The seller shall provide buyer with copies of documentation from the repair persons showing the scope of work and payment. I'm sorry.
Where's that?
Scope of work and payment for the work completed, and at seller's expense, arrange for the transfer of any transferable warranties with respect to the repairs and treatments to buyer at closing. If seller fails to complete any agreed repairs and treatments prior to the closing date, buyer may exercise remedies under paragraph 15 or extend the closing date up to 5 days if necessary for the seller to complete the repairs and treatments.
All right. When you come back over here, I want you to see this. When you look at that, it basically says, okay, hey, look, this is governed by paragraph 7, right? So that's reason it matters what you're doing here. It has everything about that saying it has to be a licensed professional. If there's not a required license, got to be somebody commercially working into the trade. All these things apply. So me putting that thing about licensed roofer, do I have to put it there? Do I have to put license? Nah, I don't really have to. But sometimes we just double down on some things that we need to double down on, right? So that's all it's about there, right? Keep in mind paragraph 7 when you're writing these things out. If you're a listing agent, you got to have the conversation with the seller and say, you can't get Pookie to go do the repairs, okay? You know what I'm saying? You can't, if it's just something that has to be a licensed person or somebody commercially working to the trade, a lot of times what's going to happen with sellers, 9 chances out of 10 with a seller, what they're going to do? Are you commercially in the trade of that? If it's just handyman stuff, then you could probably get away with it. But if you're talking about, hey, I don't know, replace some stucco, would that be, do you need a license to replace stucco? No, you don't. If you've never replaced stucco and now you want to replace stucco, can you do that on your house? I don't know. That's a debatable thing. And it's always going to come down to stucco because a lot of times we have a lot of stuff with stucco. And I throw that out there to you because that's a real, yeah, it's the paint that's problem, right? So then the seller's, okay, this guy just came out and quoted me $3,000. I can do it for $500, right? So you're going to have that argument. But if it's a roofer, got to be licensed. If it's a plumber, got to be licensed. If it's electricity, got to be licensed. If we're talking about structural changes, foundation, you got to have a structural engineer come out there. So I just tell you, you got to think along the lines. You wear 3 hats when you're doing this. You wear that realtor hat, consumer hat, and the entrepreneur hat. So you got to wear all 3 hats when you're doing this. The realtor hat is, okay, what's within these regulations, what these rules are. You got to wear that hat, right? The consumer, like, hey, what is it to them? And then the entrepreneur, you got to have sales and you got to balance them all, right? Okay. There's situations like this I tell all the time. Sometimes if I think it's going to be caught in the appraisal, like mold and cracked windows, that's a no-brainer. Hey, Mr. Seller, you got to get that fixed. But if it's something that's just subject to the buyer, you got to make some decisions, all right? You got to make some decisions. You got to keep the deal going forward, but you got to make some decisions. Here's some examples of things, put up there. Hey, seller show, reseal all roof penetrations and seal all exposed nails and rooftops. Seller shall correct ponding issues on the flat roof section and ensure roof materials are properly placed and relatively to drip edge. All right. Just give you some examples of things. Now, the way it's used, though, it's not optional. When you use that word shall, that's must. Okay. But you got to be clear and concise about what the repair is going to be. Questions? Okay, let's jump into the next one. Paragraph 9. Who's going to be my paragraph 9 person read? You got it open? You got paragraph 9 open? All right. Paragraph 9 is just the closing date, right? Now, does it say on or before? If you're closing earlier, you don't need to change nothing. Everybody with me? All right. Paragraph 9 is the closing date. I wouldn't wait till the last minute to do this. If you start to see problems or things start to happen, what's the indicator, at least on the buying side, if things are going to not go so well?
Underwriting issues.
Even before that.
Are you out of contract?
If your buyer or the lender go on the witness protection program and you can't get a hold of them, there's problems. I need you to have your spidey senses go out. I can't get a hold of the buyer. I can't get a hold of the lender. I want you to automatically start saying, I think there's problems. Let's dig. If you can't get over hold of the lender for a couple of days and you can't get a hold of the buyer for a couple of days, just think there's problems. Okay. Start to escalate then. You're right, underwriting and all this other stuff. But the true indicator when problems start to rise, people start to get quiet. Right? Especially lenders. If you get a good lender and they're out front and telling you everything, then you don't have to worry about that. But when lenders start to get quiet, you should start worrying. All right. All you got to do is fill in the new date here. Block 4. Earnest money, paragraph 12A1B. Somebody got me? I need somebody to put up the contract.
Releases of existing liens, including prepayment penalties, recording fees, release of seller's loan liability, tax statements or certificates, preparation of deed, 1/2 of escrow fee, brokerage fees that seller has agreed to pay, and other expenses payable by seller under this contract.
So there, all you have to do is put whatever changed in accordance with paragraph 12A.
1B is the following amount to be applied to brokerage fees that buyer has agreed to pay.
I got the wrong section. I put earnest money. Hold on. I could have did a mistake. I could have swore I did this morning. So let me work with y'all. 1B. I could be wrong. It's okay. I've been wrong before. Yeah. So yeah, I did do that wrong. So it's actually 12A1B. When you look at this right here, it's actually applied towards the, yep, I was wrong. That shouldn't say earnest money up there. Take that off. I don't know why I put earnest money. My bad, y'all. Okay, so that paragraph relates to the commissions and closing costs and things like that. If there's changes to that, that's what you do. Okay, let me talk about this one thing. All right, 2 weeks ago, one of the agents came and talked to me. We had $3,000 into this paragraph and that they were going to give. I want to look at that paragraph. It was just 2 weeks ago. No, it wasn't yours. Oh, yeah, it was yours. It was yours. So we had a situation that was like 2 weeks ago, right? So the buyer rep had 4% in it. And then what ended up happening was that the seller agreed to 3%, correct? And the question was about the other percent. Do we need to go modify the buyer rep agreement and all this other stuff? No, the buyer agreed to pay the 4% on the buyer rep. There's nothing needs to be done extra other than probably a title or whoever needs to see it, seeing that the buyer agreed to pay the 4%, right? They may ask for the buyer rep agreement, at the end, but there's no reason to modify the buyer rep agreement if the buyer's still willing to give that 1%. The problem comes in when, for whatever reason, the buyer rep agreement was 3% and the seller was gonna get 4%. Now we got to go back and modify the buyer rep agreement. Okay, because now we got to increase the buyer rep agreement to agree to the 4%. But if it's the other way around, there's no reason to go back and modify that. It's just, hey, the buyer's got to come up with 1% at closing. More than likely, they're going to ask us for the buyer rep agreement showing that the buyer agreed to pay 4%.
And if it's coming from concessions, they ask for more concessions that's needed at closing,
What do you mean coming from concessions?
that 1%. Is that possible?
From that amount on C? So you're trying to sit there and say you want to take that 1% from concessions?
Yeah.
Nah, that's not going to happen. You got to collect it from the buyer. It could be if the buyer wanted to do that, but that would come down to what the buyer wanted. Yeah.
Ben, I have a question.
Yep.
So when you say you need to amend, let's go back with your last scenario. If the buyer rep agreement said 3%, but the seller offering 4%, you go back to the buyer rep agreement and amend that, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I just want to make it clear that it's not this particular.
Amendment. It's a totally different
Cool.
changed. This amendment is only amendment to the contract. That buyer rep agreement is not part of the contract.
Correct. I just wanted to make sure it was clear that those two were different.
Yes. So if that's what the buyer wanted to do, they could. I just think the lender would have to know that because their lender's going to get this contract, say, okay, what's being applied is 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, whatever. If the buyer says, I want to take from some of that 4,000 and give it to the agent, the lender's got to know. And that's a totally different conversation for lender, buyer, and buyer's agent. Title's going to look at this and say, okay, they're collecting X amount from the seller, and that's what's going to be applied. So it could be done. All right.
If it was gonna be a part of their closing costs, that'd be on them, but they could pay you separately. That's a separate contract,
Pay the brokerage.
or the brokerage, yeah, they
Yeah.
could handle it outside of the contract. That extra.
It can. It could, because it's covered there. It could. As long as they pay the brokerage and
I'm not
then,
asking for cash for my clients.
all right. Got it. Let's go back over here. We're moving pretty good. Okay, let's go here. Section 5 is the one about the earnest money. I messed that one up. So section 5. Okay, 12A1C. Did I mess that up again?
That's connected to the one above.
Yeah, I'm
So
sorry.
That creates the maximum.
Yeah, creates a maximum. Okay, gotcha. All right, so we talked about that already. All right, let's go to the next one. 6, lender required repairs. All right, so here in 6 on lender required repairs, if it comes down that specifies the buyer and seller is gonna share cost, this is where you would put where the buyer would be paying and the seller would be paying, split some costs. If it comes down to that for lender required repairs. As we talk about lender required repairs, who is required to pay for lender required repairs? It's negotiable. We've had buyers pay for lender required repairs and they did not close. And we don't have a form to protect the buyer to get their money returned. Hey, I'm going to pay for some required repairs or any repairs of that matter. And they're going to do it. First, it has to be authorized here, the change on this form to do that. Secondly, there's no form that we have to protect the buyer to get their money back. Not as realtors. You could do something with attorneys, but there's no form we have in place to protect the buyer to get their money for repairs back. There's no form out there in Texas. If you have that situation come up, we always advise the buyer that you don't close, we don't have any remedy to get your money back. All right, so there's a risk there.
Wouldn't the better practice be to try and get them paid through closing, and then there's not a sake of getting the money back, it's about that contractor trying to get paid?
That's the best practice. I'm just telling you, if you come to this and you're saying buyers paying this, sellers paying that, and you have to fill this one out and tell that buyer, if you're on the buying side, we have to protect your dollar if you don't close. Obviously, we want to have it totally different and hopefully the seller do it or something like that. It has to get done prior to closing if it's a lender required repair. Debbie and I got a situation right now with a property right up the street where we found a contractor to do almost $13,000 in repairs. He's doing all the repairs to bring the house to FHA standard because it wasn't. And he's doing all this and he's going to get paid at closing from the seller. Who's taking the risk? I think that contractor's taking the risk more than anybody else.
Slap a mechanics lien though, at the end of the.
All that.
towards the property,
Yeah,
which
all
way
that.
the seller ultimately.
All that applies. If something happened where it don't close and he's out $13,000, he's got to go through all those processes and judicial systems and whatever case would be.
As far as our locale, is it more common or is it really just price dependent on contractors willing to be paid at closing or not?
It
just depends.
That's where you get paid this big money.
To negotiate.
So all negotiable. But all I'm saying for right now is you're representing the buyer and you come down to this portion, I think you need to have something in writing saying, hey, Mr. Buyer, if you don't close, we can't help you. You're gonna have to get an attorney.
I have a question. When are you notified about vendor required repairs? So you get the inspection report.
The appraisal. So when
Oh, you notified during appraisal. That's past the option period at that point. Now you-
14 days into the contract, you get an appraisal back. It's gonna say, hey, property appraised at value X, subject to, it's gonna say all these repairs. And that's gonna be lender required repairs. Hopefully you don't get sheets and sheets of repairs like we got on our appraisal.
And you said, hey, if I get that, you might want to get something right before you present it to the buyer.
In this case, that's a different situation. Our scenario is that the contractor took the risk to do all the repairs without being paid until closing. The seller's gonna pay for it at closing. 'Cause if the scenario was different where the buyer was going to pay this contractor and somehow the buyer didn't close, that's where I'm saying, if you represent that buyer, you need to have something in place saying, we don't have anything in place to get you your money back. Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
I have a question. So if the seller decides to pay at closing to the contractor and they don't, and the contractor decides to put the lien on the house, what will happen after that? Will the buyer close or no closing, or what will be the scenario after that?
So the buyer, the title's transferred, right? I don't think because we got it in our contract, in this case, that this can't even transfer unless the seller pays this money. So in this scenario, the way we've written it, it couldn't even happen.
Okay.
And we locked it up pretty tight.
Okay.
Great questions, really great questions. Let's keep on going here. 7. Let's read 7. It says buyer has paid the seller an additional option fee of blank for the extension of the unrestricted right to terminate the contract on or before 5 p.m. on blank. The additional option fee will be or will not be credited to the sales price. So we're only using that if we're extending the option period. You have to have something in there. You have to have some fee in there in order to have consideration to get the extension, even if it's $1. And if you put $1 in there, you need to make sure the $1 get turned into title. Okay, you have to make sure that $1 to get turned into title. I hate to see these when they have $0 in this extension. You see them all the time. If you read this the proper way, you're supposed to have something for consideration to extend, right? So even if it's $1, what I'm telling you, if that's what you renegotiate, $1 for a 5-day extension, somebody needs to take $1 up to title, right? Somebody needs to wire $1 to title or something. It needs to happen, okay? When you have 0 in there, it's a problem. And this was the only one that has a suspension of a time of 5 p.m. on that date. So make sure you specify that time. Let's go to the next one. Buyer waives the unrestricted right to terminate the contract for which the option fee was paid. So in this case, the buyer paid the option fee, but they want to come back in afterwards. We've executed, and now they want to waive it. It happens. Why? It happens, right? But once you waive it, you can't come back and unchange this one, right? You can't come back and amend this one, right? It's a one-time deal. Once you waive, it's waived, right? And it says the buyer can't back out of the contract under this option, meaning they don't have the unrestricted right to terminate. So they could be subject to paragraph 15 at that time. Okay, that's all it's really saying.
And there's no refunding of the option money.
Never. There's no refund of option money ever in any contract. All right.
So
have a quick
even
question.
if, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
so even if they paid for the option period and then waived the termination, they still don't get it. But why would they waive that termination?
I don't know why somebody would do it. I'm not-
Maybe it's like
Aggressive seller.
Is this executed already?
It's executed already.
But if they gave them a long one
Yeah.
and the seller's no, because they're still under contract.
They're in the contract, they paid their option fee, they have an option fee, and then they want, I don't know why that's there. I've never used that since I've been doing real estate.
Because if you trust them, they just won't use it.
Okay, I'm sure there's a reason why it's there, and somewhere in Texas real estate, they needed that for some reason. I just never used it.
Verbally, somebody said, oh, we're not gonna use it, and somebody sued for that. Like a buyer, right? Saying, no, we're not gonna use the option fee, it's just standard
But-
practice.
But
Now,
let's say you already got an option period of 10 days. You've already paid. You're good to go. You got this option period for 10 days. And now the buyer comes back and wants to waive the unrestricted. I never use it. And Marty's probably got some perspective of where she used it. Let's see. What's up, Marty?
So Mike, wouldn't it be like in a scenario where you've already gone through, I've seen it done, where the negotiations have been done, they've completed it, and so they're just saying, hey, we don't need to finish going forward with it because we've already negotiated, to just end your option period now?
Yeah.
Or,
Like I said, that could be it, but I've never used it. I don't see why somebody would want to use it.
to confirm no more repair amendments are submitted,
You can submit repair amendments all the way up to the day of closing.
but they don't carry as much weight if it's done before, because I can terminate right now before the option period. All right, but I'm also gonna submit this back and check that box, because we're agreeing to these repairs, and then that's it. That locks that buyer in. It's more of a.
or
seller.
also back when it was multiple offer situations where the listing agent or the seller might be pressuring the buyer, like, hey, we have another backup contract, so either you move forward with this and waive your option period, basically like a tactic of the listing agent, not
Could
so
be.
much the buyer.
I've never used it to date. Even through the craziness of COVID, we have done that before, but after the fact, I've never used number 8. But at least we understand what number 8 is for now. All right, so let's keep on going. All right, great discussion. I have never used it. Number 9, the date for the buyer to give written notice to the seller that the buyer cannot obtain buyer approval as set forth in third-party finance addendum has changed to. If that date was going to change, now you know how you put 14 days or 15 days or whatever, 10 days, whatever that looks like. Now the buyer says, I can't make it during that time. Now we're going to change it to this date. 14 days has passed. The buyer cannot obtain buyer approval, the conditional approval, and now they want to extend that from 14 days to 2 more days, where you have to actually put the date in there instead of 2 days. You actually put the date and put it in there, okay? To extend that deadline. Changes the deadline for the buyer number. Gotcha. Next one. Let's go to other modifications. All right, so anything we haven't covered up to this point, and there was going to change the contract, this is what this section is for. As long as you're not practicing law, right? And if you feel like something you're writing is changing the scope of the contract, right? You could be practicing law, right? Things like this is probably okay. Credit for carpet replacement, right? Removal of temporary lease, change of buyer's name, seller to leave X appliances now, or something like that, right? We're not modifying or changing the contract, right? When you start getting the language about buyer willing to
I was gonna say
pay the difference between sales price and this, and you're going to start getting into that world because the VA buyer has to have that right to waive to get out of the contract if it doesn't appraise. When you start getting into language like that, or escalation clauses and things like that we got real crazy in 2020 about, and it got stupid in here. It was just stupid with the language we was getting, and we were getting these at the time of receiving offers. We was getting amendments saying, hey, the VA buyer is willing to go $20,000 above the asking price. which totally takes away from the third party financing them and everything about having the right to waive their appraisal and all that stuff like that. You start to get in practicing law. And that's what we start getting some crazy stuff in. So I would tell you, if you start getting into the other modifications, as long as it's factual, as long as it's not you're practicing law, you got to just be careful what you put out there. I would just ask for you, let me know, and then we talk about it. But you can use this quite often. All right. I know the TCs use it quite often. I use it quite often. It could be a myriad of things you could put in there. All right. Okay. It says down at the bottom, hey, consult an attorney before signing. Is telling the parties, right? Both parties. And then in order for this to be executed, you got to have the date and everything down there.